Hey athletes, happy Sunday. I've just wrapped up all of my workouts for the weekend and have some celebratory beverages. But before we get into that, I've had a number of questions from aspiring and beginner triathletes out there regarding building a training plan. So in today's video, we are going to teach you the 3 foundational principles that every triathlete and every athlete should be using to build a successful training strategy to have the best race day possible. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you perhaps the biggest key to your success as an Ironman athlete and building a smarter training strategy. So let's dig in. All right, so we're going to talk about the 3 phases that are essential in triathlon training. But before we get to that, let's talk about the weekend workouts. Getting back from Hawaii was a little bit of a reset. So this weekend was able to accomplish a 12-mile run. That was a huge accomplishment, seeing that in Hawaii, I was only able to do about 7 miles because of the injured calf. So I'm working it back into shape. Hopefully by next week, I'll be at full capacity. Then I was also able to complete 3 hours indoor cycling. Did not feel like driving an hour to cycle, so I had to force 3 hours indoors, which was excellent. And then I got a 2,000-meter swim at the pool. So all around a good, solid fitness weekend. Next weekend, I'm actually traveling, and I'll share those plans with you in next week's video. So now let's get to the 3 phases of triathlon training. So phase 1, this is always called the base phase. This is core endurance and strength building. So if you imagine a pyramid, at the bottom of a pyramid is the foundation. That's exactly what the base phase of training should be. We're not necessarily working on swim, bike, run. Instead, we're trying to enhance all of our physical capacities and capabilities. We're building our endurance strength. We're building our muscular strength. So what we do in this period isn't as important as consistency of showing up and putting in work each and every day. Now, how many days a week should we be building the base plan? Minimum 4 days a week, but in a perfect world, we're starting to build 5 to 6 days a week of different trainings, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour each training session. Now, the question is, how long should my base phase take? And that's a more nuanced answer, and it'll depend on where you're at in your current physical journey. For people that are already very active, maybe running some half marathons or marathons, your base phase maybe only needs to be 1 month long. But if we're starting from scratch, we're just getting inspired and trying to get into some sort of new activity, the base phase realistically should be at least 3 months long. Now, during this phase, ego needs to be left at the door. It isn't about how fast, how hard, or how far we go. This is all about consistency. Start to build those disciplines to show up at the gym, at the track, or at the beach regularly, and by showing up consistently, results are sure to follow. All right, so that was phase 1, base phase. Can't be ignored, can't be shortcutted, so stick to that phase if that's where you're at. But phase 2 of triathlon training is what we call the build. Now is when we start to incorporate sport-specific movements. So we want to make sure we have a swim, a bike, and a run each and every week. And we're going to start to build those distances slowly over time. Okay. What we want to avoid doing is building our distances too quickly. So an example, I'm running 6 miles right now. Next week, jumping out and doing 10. That would be a recipe for disaster. Instead, we want to slowly build those distances so our bodies can slowly start to accommodate to those new challenges, to those new stressors, and to the new stimulus. Typical build phase is going to be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. That's on top of the base phase. So you have the 3-month base phase, and then a solid build should be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. For me, Ironman 70.3, I use a 3-month build phase. For full Ironman distance, I use a 6-month build phase. But what we want to do here is customize it to where you're currently at and reverse engineer it from when your next race is. So for my wife, example, she loves running the same distance 2 weeks in a row. So in her build phase, we build in an 8-mile week followed by another 8-mile week, then followed by a 9-mile week and another 9-mile week. What this really does is it allows you to not only get used to a new distance, but then the second attempt actually start to enjoy it. And that's a huge boost for your mental capacity when you go into a race, not only when you've done the distance, but when you've actually had fun accomplishing it. So a good build, we're going to build nice and slow. Again, we don't necessarily need to be worrying about speed or any of those things at this point. It's just getting up to the correct distances for the race that I'm trying to accomplish. The final phase of triathlon training, this is what we call the peak phase. This is when we are getting as race specific as we possibly can. So not only are we swim, biking, and running consistently, but now we're starting to put those two disciplines together in what we would call a brick workout. If you've never heard the term brick workout before, very easy. It's essentially taking the swim and the bike and putting them back to back in a workout with no rest, or taking bike and run, putting them back to back in a workout with no rest. The latter is definitely the most common because it's the easiest for us to accomplish a bike and a run back to back. Okay. Now, the peak phase is the shortest of all 3 phases. Realistically, it should be anywhere from 3 weeks up to about 4 or 5 weeks, but that's maximum capacity. What we're trying to do is build our fitness, build our endurance for the race, but we don't want to overshoot it. We want, when we show up to race day, for us to not only be as fresh, have much pop in our leg as possible, but have the confidence that we have the stamina to actually do the effort. So the peak phase is now when we are starting to push our pace a little bit, but again, we're using those brick workouts to build that confidence. Give you an example, Claudia's marathon in 2 weeks. She's in the peak phase of her training. So today was a 20-mile run, her longest run, her final run, and she was doing it at race pace. So it's as close to a race simulation as you could get, not only going the furthest distance before the race, you're practicing nutrition, but you're also trying to go at race pace with race distance. So the peak is as race specific as we get. And again, the key here, we don't want to stay in this zone for too long. Peak phase, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks maximum, and then we are race ready. So at the beginning of the video, I talked about there would be one bonus, my secret sauce for going from couch potato to Ironman with relative ease, and that answer is consistency. When we talk about the base, the build, or the peak, we can't move from one phase to the next unless we are a very consistent athlete. This gets very challenging in the world that we live in today. We have full-time jobs, spouses, families, all these different things pulling us in directions. Skipping days, skipping weeks can become very easy to do if we allow ourselves. So as you're building this process of thinking about or going for an Ironman, you really want to prioritize consistency. Forget as much as you can about the race distances and just commit to showing up each and every day and doing workouts in. Consistency builds on consistency. Start to stack those days, and all of a sudden, before you know it, your endurance, your motivation, your happiness, all the different things that we're trying to uplift through this sport are going to be there in spades just because you consistently showed up. So thanks for watching. As always, hit the like button, hit the subscribe. I'll see you next week, and have a wonderful weekend.